This program, while curated to help you improve your health, contains general advice and should not replace the individual advice of your medical practitioner.
What is fasting?
So fasting is the abstinence of food. There's so many different types of fasting out there.
How did it feel for you to see somebody walk in like that and to see them walk out a completely different person?
I think for me, like the only thing that I can describe it as is miraculous.
Do you think emotional wellness is important to gut health?
Absolutely. I'm laughing because my view and opinion is that it is all emotional.
In life, it's normal to have ups and downs. But what do we do when we get stuck? I've always been fascinated by the healing journey. Why do some people get better while others fail to make the shift? Welcome to the Expert Series, where you'll meet 25 of the world leaders in health and wellness, discussing their passions and what it takes to make your shift.
There's an electrical feeling in the room.
I had to be a mom. It was so important to me.
I've always been a pain in the butt, and I love that.
I knew that I wanted to help people.
I'm Katherine Maslen, and this is The Shift.
Hi, I'm Katherine Maslen, naturopath, author and host of The Shift. In the Expert Series, we share the insights, stories and expertise of each of our amazing experts. You might have met them on season 1 of The Shift, where we took snippets of these conversations and put them together into the series. If you haven't listened to season 1 yet, I'd recommend going back and listening to episode 1 on what it takes to make a shift in your gut health. We'll provide a link in the show notes. In this episode, we have the wonderful Kate Reardon. Kate is a trailblazer when it comes to looking at health truly holistically, being a naturopath, nutritionist, healer, and co-founder of the fasting and detox retreat centre Natural Instinct Healing, which operates in Ubud, Bali and Australia. Kate is a mother, author, and host of the amazing podcast Lean In. She is the author of the book The Essential Cleanse, a media expert, and speaks internationally on all things health, healing, and heart. Kate's approach to wellness is a breath of fresh air, and I know for each and every one of you, you'll gain something from listening to this episode. Listen out for the effects of our emotions on health and how holding onto them may make us unwell, our layers of consciousness and how we process what is going on for us, and the effects of fasting and why it is so beneficial for your health. Kate also shares a raw story about how she navigated her husband's cancer diagnosis, which I'm sure a lot of you will resonate with. First up, I got Kate to introduce herself.
My name is Kate Reardon. I am an author, speaker, naturopath, nutritionist, healer, mother, but I'm the founding director of Natural Instinct Healing.
Wow, so you're a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to you about all of them.
Okay.
Absolutely. But first I want to talk about what has been your journey to actually get to this point where you are all these things and wear so many hats and are so much to so many people.
Yeah, I guess I think career-wise, I eventually found my way to naturopathy after trying journalism, after backpacking around the world for 3 years. And I never quite knew what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to help people and support people and make an impact. And that eventually led me to study naturopathy. And there's a funny story, actually. It all happened in the Amazon with a shaman and just showing me the magic of plants and plant medicine and healing and the healing power of Mother Nature and how important the simple things are like fresh air and sunlight and just living sustainably and alongside Mother Nature. So fast forward, I studied a bachelor degree in naturopathy and a bachelor degree in nutritional medicine. And I set up my private practice and I was so excited to jump in that practitioner chair and start diving into my dreams. But what happened was it didn't really fill me up as much as what I thought it would. I was seeing clients, I was booked, it was incredible. People were coming and I was having really profound challenges and then great breakthroughs with people. But what I was really interested in was all of the in-between moments. So for example, someone would come in and tell me all about their diet and what they're eating. But for me, it was always like, what's underneath that layer? And I'd notice someone would talk about their mum and I'd feel this shift in their whole body. And that's what I wanted to explore, not so much the nutrients that they needed at the time, but I wanted something to marry the two together. I was also going through big personal changes and really coming into myself and trusting my intuition a lot more. And so as clients were coming to see me, I was able to access not only their diet and their biochemistry, but also their energetic field and, the stories and self-sabotage that they were carrying, their behaviors, addictions, all of that. So this hour consult wasn't enough for me to really roll my sleeves up and dig into the core of what was going on. So eventually I ended up founding Natural Instinct Healing and the retreat style of working with people. So I have them for 10 days now. And it's like, let's talk about that thing with your mum. Let's talk about your childhood. Let's really work on that shoulder release in a yoga session. Having people for a longer amount of time was so pivotal in me coming into my full expression as a practitioner, because I was able to treat these people mind, body, and spirit and give them everything. And for me, that just feels so good to be able to do that.
I want to know, what was the specific experiences that you were having that led you to make that decision to then go on to study naturopathy?
When I first left high school, I did a year of journalism. I was really passionate about writing. And I knew that I wanted to change things in the world. And I thought that my words was what was going to be the tool to get me there. And when I was in the Amazon, I met this shaman there, and it was all very serendipitous how it happened. I happened to meet this guy in Ecuador. Pat, my husband, and I were there. And I didn't want to go on a jungle safari tourist thing. I wanted the real experience of what life was like in there. So this family just literally pulled us in, and it happened to be the shaman of the village. So every day he would give me different jobs, and I'd go out and crush berries and make pastes and crush leaves. And what he showed me, the most powerful thing is that the poisonous plants, wherever they were, the antidote to that was less than a meter away. So whenever there's a problem in life, and this was his metaphor, and this is what I learned in the jungle, the problem or the solution is so close that it feels like ridiculous. And so there I just got this love of plant medicine. But also, a lot of the plants that he was showing me, it wasn't to treat physical ailments. It was to treat emotional ailments. So if someone's sad, if they are disconnected from their inner child, there was a plant for that. There was plants for, if someone's grieving and the spirit of the loved one is still around the body, you take this plant to send the loved one on the way. And that was just fascinating to me, that Mother Nature has all these incredibly potent plants of, yes, we can understand how they can cure and support physical ailments, but the emotional side of things is what blew my mind.
So tell me, do you remember the moment when you made the decision to kind of go, I'm not going to be a traditional naturopath, I need to be looking at something else?
Yes, I do, distinctly. I was on the Gold Coast where my first clinic was set up. I'd seen 7 patients, and my clinic grew really fast, which is kind of unheard of as a freshly graduated green naturopath, or anyone in any industry, that first year out of college or university. And so I was booked, and I kind of had everything that I'd prayed for. I had a beautiful clinic in this multi-modality team. So there were acupuncturists, integrative doctors, chiropractors, and I was the naturopath nutritionist there. I was fully booked, and, just thought that this was how it was going to be. And this one day I had seen 7 back-to-back patients. And at the end of the day, I felt like I was excited, but there was something missing, and I couldn't shake that something missing feeling. And I got really depressed about it because I was like, I've been studying for 5.5 years at university. I've worked 3 jobs to get myself to this point. I gave everything to my dreams, and why aren't I feeling incredibly inspired and elated and fully alive right now? Why am I not? I don't know. There was just this discontentment inside me. And I drove my car to the beach when I left the clinic. And that's something I used to do a lot, just go down to the ocean and kind of clear the day away. And I remember sitting out at the ocean and I just started to cry because there was this emptiness inside of me. And I went down to the ocean fully clothed and jumped in, like in my, my dress that I wore to clinic and everything. And so people watching would have thought this lady is actually insane. But I remember diving under that wave and I was like, there has to be another way for me to show up in the world that's going to bring me alive. Because if I keep doing this within these parameters of what I should be doing, I'm never going to be happy.
So you've made that realization and sort of shifted your energy in that direction. What showed up for you to keep going on that journey?
Oh my God. As soon as I admitted that I wasn't happy, that was the biggest thing, because I was trying to pretend to be happy for so long. And as soon as I admit it to myself, there is something missing here. From that moment, everything changed. I was just getting more opportunity to teach different things. So for example, I was very heavily nutrition based back then. So a lot of the talking and public speaking and workshops I were doing was based around food and food preparation and, our bodies. And then I started getting invited to talk about meditation or talk about how our emotions affect our biochemistry. And so that just really opened up a new level of conversation for me. And then I was really, in my own personal practice, just really feeling like, well, what works for me? What speaks to me that I'm passionate about? Yoga is one of those things. Meditation is one of those things. Really looking at the emotions was one of those things as well. Like not just being focused on supplements and food, but going that deeper layer of like, well, let's get into the core. Like, why is the gut presenting like this? Or why is those headaches chronic at this time of day? Like really looking at the energetics of it. And so I feel like it was this natural progression that just happened so organically and so effortlessly. The more I went into my own spirit and really uncovered my own emotional, spiritual side, the deeper it happened in my work.
What happened next?
So then I moved up to North Queensland and I had to start my clinic from scratch. My husband got a job transfer and we were looking for a change. So I moved up there and I wasn't healthy in my body. I was really burnt out, actually. My self-care practices were really low. I was in that unhealthy framework that a lot of practitioners get into of serving everyone else and not myself. Really, I was not walking my talk as best as I could be. And I made this commitment of deep integrity. And I was like, if I really want to be the change maker that I know I could be, then I really need to show up to me first. And so in that realization came of, I can't be in a normal clinic because it's just not who I am. So I worked really deep on going into, well, what can I do and who am I and why am I here, and asking myself those bigger questions. And then within that process, I got this random email from someone I'd never heard of before. And he asked me if I wanted to come and run a health retreat in Thailand. And it was a fasting detox retreat. And I had an interview with him and my old boss, he's a beautiful man. And I said everything in the interview that you should not say. Like he was saying, you know, how long could you commit to the job? And I was like, well, I've never been to Thailand, so I don't really know if I'll like it, because I didn't really want the job, if that makes sense. And he was like, and tell me about your experience with fasting. I was like, well, I've never fasted before. I've done short fasts when I've been sick. I don't know if I'll like it. I don't know what I believe. Actually, I don't even believe it's that great, to be honest. And yeah, and he asked me just a few questions. And then a couple of days later, he rang me and he's like, you've got the job. And I said to him, I think you've called the wrong person. Because I was so honest and so real and so non-attached. So, yeah, and anyway, within 2 weeks, I was on a flight to Thailand on my own and running a detox health retreat over there.
So you've gone to Thailand, running retreats, never fasted yourself. What were some of the things you began to realise or experience or observe once you were there?
When I did some research before I went around fasting, and I couldn't find a whole lot, to be honest. There was a lot of ancient kind of fasting stuff, but it was all old stories passed down, not any current up-to-date scientific research. So I did a lot of reading, and I was coming at it from a very intellectual point of view, really trying to understand the breakdown of toxins in the body and how they operate on all the different organ levels, and really trying to understand it from the mind. When I got to Thailand, obviously I was going to do my first fast so that I had that experience in my body. My mind couldn't quite put it all together. Like I could understand bits and pieces, but the fasting we did at that particular point was 9 days. And I'm like, do you really need 9 days? How long does it take to clean? Like I was trying to really come at it from this intellectual point of view. When I started fasting, however, dropping into my body's wisdom, it just gave me all the answers that I could ever need. And I remember day 1, day 2 were horrific because I'd come off caffeine, off sugar, and I wasn't eating that much sugar, but still it was like the worst hangover I've ever had. And I've had some bad ones. So that's saying something. But I was really like, what am I doing here? Why have I moved here? This is not healthy. And then that kind of started shifting. And then I remember on day 4, I woke up in the morning and I just felt this mental clarity that I have never experienced in my life before. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I have to share this with the entire world. Like everything just made sense to me at that point because it was my personal experience and I wasn't coming in trying to understand it. It was like a lived body experience and something just clicked inside of me and it all made perfect sense. And I've been on the mission to share it with the world ever since then.
If this episode is leaving you wanting more, I'll be hosting a live webinar on gut health. Join me and get the opportunity to get your gut health questions answered. Go to theshiftclinic.com/webinar. See you there.
The Shift!
So tell me, for people that don't know, what is fasting?
So fasting is the abstinence of food. Now, there's so many different types of fasting out there, and it's actually becoming more mainstream with the rise in popularity of intermittent fasting and just different kinds of fasting. So basically, the digestive system is designed to heal and repair itself. We know that. Our whole body, it's the most perfectly engineered, intricate machine on the planet. It is designed to heal itself. When you really break down into the subtleness of that, it's just extraordinary. I've been studying the human body for 20 years and I'm still blown away and still learning every single day. So with fasting, when you take food away, the gut has a chance to heal itself. Because when you think about when we're digesting, we're smelling and looking and tasting and chewing and then swallowing, and then all the hydrochloric acid and the enzymes have to break that down, and then the small intestine has to sort all of that out, and then the large intestine has to remove all the waste. Like, the digestion is working hard every single day. And you think about how much food we're eating every single day. It works around the clock nonstop. So by taking some of the pressure off the digestive system, you switch into this rapid healing that allows for not only the digestive system, but the whole entire body to really go into that rest, repair, and heal mechanism. So for me, that's the invitation of fasting. Yes, it's taking food away, but what it's really doing is allowing fundamental healing and repair of all the tissues of the body.
So I want to go into the emotional part of fasting as well, because I think that's a really huge part of it. But can you tell me, why is it important for people to put themselves in this state where they allow their body to have that space and to detoxify and do all of that stuff?
I think we never get the opportunity to really do that in our lives, especially in the West. It's just our mindset and just life in general, what we're exposed to, even the simple things like Wi-Fi radiation and white noise all around us, and we're constantly stimulated all the time. And so as we know, that just kind of really kicks that flight or fight response to keep going and going and going. And there's not much time in our lives that we have to really give ourselves permission to just unplug and rest, but go into that deep rest where the body can actually restore. So with the incredible thing about fasting, and this is what it all melded together and just really unified, and why I became so in love with it, and I'm still so in love with it, is because it honors the mind, the body, and the spirit. Because we are all one. We are not the muscle and bones of our body. We're more than that. And we're also more than the monkey mind chatter of our mind every day. We're this big, gigantic source of energy that is created from so much life. And what's happening inside of us is extraordinary. And fasting speaks to that. You can't clean up the body without also cleaning up the mind and the spirit as well. You can't say, okay, I'm going to clean my body and clean my liver, but I don't want to deal with any of my problems because they've just got to be buried down there. It doesn't work like that. When you set the intention to cleanse or to let go or to release, which is what detoxification is, your whole self is on board with that. Because we are this incredibly intelligent being, we're so much more than our biochemistry. And so the emotional side of fasting is something that really spoke to me because, and especially the spiritual side of fasting as well, fasting is the only common denominator across all religions. So every kind of cultural, religious tradition in the world has the element of fasting in it to connect back into who they are. So Jesus fasted, Buddha fasted, Muhammad fasted, and it allows that space for coming back into one's center, letting go of anything that no longer serves you, whether that's physical toxins, whether that's inflammation, old drugs floating around in the bloodstream, self-sabotaging beliefs, addictions, unhealthy relationships, toxic people, or just energetic debris that you're holding onto. It's an invitation to let all of that go so that you can be all that you are.
So tell me, can you think of an example of somebody that's come into your centre, into your retreat centre, and a transformation that they've made and the process that they went through to get there?
There's so many. I mean, I've taken thousands of people through this process now, and there's so many different levels of transformation that can occur. But I think one of the biggest ones was a lady that came. She was 64 years old, and all her kids had grown up, and she had this chronic hip pain. And She was the kind of disposition of a lady. She was very strong and kept the whole family together. She worked out on a property her whole life, so she was really hardworking, not only in her mindset, but also in her literal physical exertion was a lot. She married quite young and her husband was away a lot, so she was doing a lot of the mothering stuff and cooking and all of that, but also a lot of the hard manual labour as well. And she had a lot of, I would say, suppressed emotion, simply generational, but also her parents, there was no room for expressing emotions, and the stories of little girls are meant to be seen and not heard. There was a lot of those conditional, generational things that she'd picked up along the way. She was an incredible woman, so strong. When I met her, I was just like, wow, she's someone I'd want on my side, because she was just like robust and just this incredible woman. But inside of her, there was all this repressed and suppressed emotion, and she hadn't really connected into her deep vulnerability, and it was all coming out in this hip pain. So it eventually got to the point where she couldn't walk without a cane. And she'd had MRIs, she'd had X-rays, she'd had, you name it, she'd done it, and nothing ever showed up apart from a little bit of inflammation. And she'd been looking for 2 years at it was excruciating for her, was painkillers and rest. So by the time she got to me, she was desperate, would do anything, and also had given up. There was also this lack of hope inside, thinking that chronic pain was just a part of her life now. She was hobbling around. I was a little nervous because at my retreat centre in Bali, there's a couple of stairs, just stairs to get up to the yoga sala, for example, getting in and out of cars, that type of thing. I was really like, oh, how's she going to be? When she first arrived in the taxi, our driver collected her from the airport. It literally took her 5 minutes to get out of the car and just to come up to meet me. So I was really conscious and cautious of what was going to happen. She'd previously sent me all the reports of her X-rays, her MRIs, her scans, everything. And I was like, this has to be emotional because there's no physical implication here for her to be in this much pain. It's just impossible. And so she started fasting. And it was the first time in her life that she'd ever given to herself, that she'd ever allowed herself just to be without working or forcing or pushing or doing. It was just being in the moment. And so you could literally see she was like this tight, wound up piece of, string, really, really tight. And then she just started to soften more and more and more, and even her face, as she was going through the process. So there was no food, but she was having juices and detox shakes, coconuts, broth, massages, meditation, yoga, all the things that we offer. And she just kept getting softer and softer and softer and softer. And then I worked with her emotionally and energetically and got to the root of some of the childhood stuff that was coming up. And the thing is that most of us contract because we're either unsafe or we are scared of something. And so there's really only, when you're tapping into the wisdom of the body, there's really only two kind of areas of movement. There's a contraction, which is, no, I'm not safe, I'm scared, I can't do it. And of course, when we're contracted, the muscles are contracted and the energy, the chi can't flow, or there's an expansion, which is open channel, getting the kink out of the hose and just letting that life force run. And that only comes when we feel safe. So for her, it was really about allowing her to feel safe in the world, to feel safe in her body, to feel safe being vulnerable and being open, and to just be who she is and who she always wanted to be. And so the process of fasting just allows for that. It's just like this organic process that happens when we set the intention to let go. A lot of the inflammation pathways were just opening up. The swelling around the hip was just slowly starting to get down. And then I remember on, I think it was the 8th or the 9th day of a 10-day fast, She just walked straight up to me. She wasn't using her cane at all. And it was the first time in 2 years. And she just said, I've never felt lighter in my life. And it was because she just honestly was working on the core of her symptoms and not really, pain is, I feel it's like the ticket for getting us engaged in our body. It's like an invitation, and her hip was screaming to her, like, you need to do something here, and I'm not going away until you get it. And what it was for her was this sense of safety and security in her body. She lost, I think, 11 kilos, which is a lot on our retreat. And she honestly looked about 10 years younger. And it was the first time in 2 years she left our retreat and she gave me her cane when she walked through the door. So it was just so powerful, because she could have just stayed contracted, kept taking painkillers, and gotten into this really unhealthy cycle. Like, her quality of life just could have gotten worse and worse and worse. But she chose to really show up to the core problem of what was going, which was this feeling of safety and security in her own body. And everything shifted from that. Her relationships with her kids. She even got home and received a huge inheritance that she had no idea she was getting. So even financially, security came in when she changed, her inner kind of workings of herself.
How did it feel for you to see somebody walk in like that and to see them walk out a completely different person?
I think for me, like, the only thing that I can describe it as is miraculous. And like, I get it, the understanding, the biochemistry. I know, like, my whole self is lived through the mind-body connection, and it's something I've been studying for years now. So it's not a surprise, but then at the end of the day, there's something that's so magical and miraculous about it that it just ignites me even deeper. And, I cry all the time in my retreats because it gives me so much hope in life again. And so then that's just medicine that I receive, and I take that back into my body and my family. And so it's really beautiful. It's an honor to witness that.
Do you think that people need to be ready to embark on that type of healing for themselves?
I think that, our intelligence of the tissues of our body, the intelligence that's far beyond the conscious mind, it knows what we can and can't handle. So if we have capacity for healing and growth, I think that we get it. And I've also seen people that have a lot of trauma, a lot of unprocessed trauma, a lot of physical dis-ease, a lot of problems, and they don't have that capacity, at that time. So, for example, I see this a lot in birth trauma with women who have had horrific births with their children, but they don't get time to process it because they have a newborn baby that they have to keep alive. So a lot of that trauma gets locked in the tissues until they have space when the child's 2 or 3 or even beyond that they can actually go in and heal some of that trauma. So I think if it's more around the stars are aligned, if you have capacity, if you feel completely safe and supported, and if you are really willing and open, then incredible things will come forward for you, because that's your intention.
So what do you say when there's somebody and they have a lot of health problems and they're seemingly doing all the right things? They're seeing the doctors, they're doing this stuff, but they're just stuck and things aren't moving. What's going on there?
There's definitely resistance of some sort. So stuck, it's like that contracted state again. There's no life force there. So nothing can move. Like, if you think of a contracted state, if you clench your fists, there's nothing can move there. And so I will always look at the resistance and help them to understand what it is. And I also look at it from a mind, body and spirit, because I think if you're only coming in with mindset, got to break down this wall so we can be happy, Well, what about the body? The body is probably not feeling safe. And what about the spiritual, energetic part of it? So I will meet the resistance. What's happening with the body? Why are the tissues contracted? Why is there inflammation? And then what's happening in the mind? What's the self-sabotaging beliefs or the self-limiting beliefs that are keeping this person, quote unquote, trapped in this energy? And what's happening energetically as well? And really looking at the resistance from a holistic point of view always gets people through quicker than just trying to bang through that wall with a sledgehammer.
So I want you to talk about this. And you can't see us, obviously, but I've just basically, put my hand right in front of my face. I was watching you speak once and you explained this perspective of what we see and what we don't see, I guess. Can you run us through that?
Sure. So we think that what is in our conscious mind is true. And the ego gets so fixated on what we think is true. Is that true or not? I don't know. And so an analogy I'll use, because you can't see me, is looking at the 6 and the 9. And this exactly happened with my daughter yesterday. She brought these blocks. She's 3 years old. She's starting to learn her numbers. And she had a 6 and a 9. And she said, "Mummy, is this 6 or is this 9? And I was sitting opposite her. And I'm like, it really depends on where you're looking from. And that's just a perfect example, because people on the left would be adamant, this is 6. I'm seeing 6. There is no way that this is a 9 because this is a 6. And there's people on the opposite side saying, that's a 9. How can you say that's a 6? That's a complete 9. And so whichever, if you're coming from the left or the right side, whatever you're seeing and perceiving and believing to be true is coming from the conscious mind of only your lived life experience. And of course there's truth in that, of course, but there is so much more. And so it's a change in perspective, but it's actually being open to potential and possibility. And the thing that's really imperative, I think, in all of this is that when you're fixated on something, it's a contracted state. And of course, there's going to be firm beliefs about how we see the world and our safety and, our integrity and our value system and our core values as human beings. Those don't change so much, but it's the little things. So for example, I'm never going to get over this cold, and that's like a simple thing that we all go through, but with that mindset and that kind of contracted state of being, whereas if you were in it all open going, wow, I've got some kind of thing attached to my body right now and it's really unusual and I'm feeling all these symptoms and it must be clearing something out. It'll be gone in a couple of days. I'm just going to take such good care of myself to really help this move through.
What's really interesting is that a lot of people who are hearing this kind of thing for the first time would think it's completely woo-woo and how does that work? But in mainstream medicine, the placebo effect is well known, as is the nocebo effect. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So, yeah, I love the placebo effect. And I say to my patients all the time, who cares if it's placebo? If you're healing and growing and opening and expanding, that's great. Who gives a shit what it's from? Sorry, my ladder swear. Beep. Block that out. But, I think, again, the thing that placebo shows us and what it reinforces is how powerful the mind is. And you look at any placebo studies, it's just so fascinating to read about how powerful that whole thing actually is. And so again, it comes down to these beliefs that we hold for ourselves and others as well. It's not the make or break of our healing because the intelligence is so far beyond that. But if you're open and willing, then you're just giving yourself the best possible chance that you need to move forward and heal.
Do you think emotional wellness is important to gut health?
Absolutely. I'm laughing because my view and opinion is that it is all emotional. And so when we're looking at the gut, if you're just treating the gut with food and supplements and what you're eating, then you're only treating it 1/3 of the way. You absolutely have to do that and I'm not discrediting that. I'm, stand 100%. I am a nutritionist and I know how crucial that is and the impact that it can have. But you will get better faster if you're also treating the emotional side of it and the spiritual, energetic side of it.
So a lot of people are going around suppressing emotions rather than expressing them or working through them or letting them go. Can you tell me, why does this seem to be the default position for humans? And also, what are the physical consequences of that for their body?
I just think that conditionally, generationally, like there's so many barriers for us to truly and safely, more importantly, express our emotions. And the majority of it is because we weren't ever allowed as kids. It's just like a crying baby. Quick, shut it up. Put a pacifier in. Put a dummy in. Give it something. Like we don't show any emotion, especially as women. And also, I think that there's some shame there. There's real shame about being emotional sometimes, or too much, or too little, or you can't think that, and comparing your wounds to someone else's wounds, and I shouldn't be like that. Like it's just this kind of thing that boils down to like we weren't really given ourselves permission to express, and then we don't have the tools to express them in a healthy way. So we'll bottle them up and then we'll explode, and people will get angry and have bar fights or road rage, or there's a point of emotions where if it's in our body and it's not being fully expressed in a healthy way, then there is a tipping point, and it will always come. And it usually comes on those people that we love the most, because we know that they're going to forgive us. So it's the guy that's had a really bad day at work and just crazy, and then he comes home and his wife's like, oh, dinner's going to be 10 minutes late, and then he just goes off the handle. It's not her at all, but it's just his tolerance and capacity because he hasn't had any safe spaces. And then there's the opposite of that, where people are expressing it and almost not too much, but in an unhealthy way. So they're telling all their problems to everyone in their life, and just it's kind of bleeding out all over the place. So I think it has so many different tentacles and how it works in people's lives. But this is what I know to be true. You need to understand how you operate so that you can really healthily have a place where your emotions are being expressed. Now, this doesn't mean yelling and screaming. It mightn't even mean, going and seeing a counselor. It could just be, like, for example, for me, when I have my shower at night before I go to bed, I just let the whole day go. And sometimes I'll cry in there, I'll stomp my feet. I just don't want to go to bed with all that unprocessed, heavy stuff. And so I just am conscious and set this intention of like, okay, I'm letting all this crap go from the day so that I can rest and get up tomorrow and do it all again with an open heart and a big smile on my face. Like it's simple little things, but it's really putting intention and awareness around how much the emotions affect our lives, our daily lives, particularly our relationships and our relationship to ourselves, and giving yourself little gaps where you can just take the edge off every now and again.
So we talked about creating space and why that's really important. And I mean, I've done a couple of the retreats with your team and had that space, and I think there's nothing like it. But how do people create space in their day-to-day to try and just be able to sit with these things and process these emotions?
I think it doesn't take much. The body is talking to us through the signs and symptoms it gives us in every single moment of every single day. And all we need to do is really tap into what it's saying to us and give it what it needs in that moment. So there's a little process that I do. Can we do it now? It's like literally 3 minutes. So if you're listening and not driving or operating machinery, but just really closing down the eyes and taking in a couple of deep breaths and really just breathing in and breathing out. And with each breath, getting a little bit deeper and a little bit slower. And just bringing all your awareness inside your body, inside your mind, and inside your heart. And the question I ask is, how am I feeling? And this is an exploration to really feel what's happening in my body. It might be a pain in the shoulder or a rumbling in the tummy. It might be an itch somewhere. How do I feel in my body? And then how do I feel emotionally right now in this minute, not this morning or not what I have to do tonight, but in this second, in this minute right now, how am I feeling? And being honest with that. And really sitting in awareness with self. And then asking yourself, what is one thing I could do right now to nourish myself? And then open up the eyes, and that's it. So for me, it's very, very simple. You don't have to go to Bali and do a 10-day retreat. It could be, you know what? I'm going to go and sit out in the backyard for 10 minutes and have a cuppa. Or I'm just going to do 10 deep breaths. Or I'm going to, put my phone on silent and just listen to a 3-minute song that I absolutely love. But the real fundamental thing here is listening to what your body, your mind, and your soul need and giving it that in that moment. And so those little chunks, which that was probably 2.5 minutes, I do those regularly throughout the day. And I'm busy, I'm working, I'm traveling a lot, I'm a working mum, I'm running businesses, I'm all over the world across all different time zones. So I am busy, and I do have this addiction to being busy. And, I kind of like stress because it gives me energy, which is unhealthy. But so to keep myself out of that, I just check in and I do these check-ins. And it's always so simple. If it's complicated, I would say you're not probably getting the right message. It's always like, go outside, get some sun on the face, take your shoes off, have a cup of tea. It's these simple, beautiful moments that we create for ourselves that just allow space. And then the emotion, which is energy in motion, has a place to go.
You've heard a lot of client stories throughout this series, and you might be wondering if we could perhaps help you. Supporting people to shift is what we do best. Health is a journey, and we can help you to navigate this with one-on-one support with our clinical naturopaths, hypnotherapists, and counsellors. If working with us one-on-one interests you, go to theshiftclinic.com and click on Shift with Us.
The Shift!
Tell me, do you think that it's important that people have support as they're going through the journey of life in helping them to identify, deal with, and move through their stuff?
Absolutely. I cannot stress this more. The support is everything. And, when we were creating the framework for natural instinct healing, the support was the biggest part. It's like, how can we support people through an intense healing journey? And when the feedback we get was like, I couldn't have done this without your support. And it's really, really beautiful because we need to feel safe in order to heal. And to feel safe, you need to feel held. And quite often when we're in trauma, when we're in disease, when we are just so exhausted, when we're depleted, when we're stressed, we can't always hold that space for ourselves. It's like you get so tired, you don't even know what's good for you anymore. And so having support around you is absolutely imperative. It's not even, is it good or not? It is crucial. I really don't believe you can get to where you want to be without good support around you. And, I look at my team, which you've played a huge role in that and really helping me in so many ways. But I have my people around me that look after my body, look after my mind, and look after my spirit. So that if I'm going through stress, or if I'm going through times of uncertainty, or I'm just like feeling wobbly, I'm supported because I've got this team around me that is incredible. And the thing is, like, even though I'm a naturopath, like, I see you as a naturopath, you know, because quite often we're stuck in our conscious mind. We're stuck in what we think we should do or something else. And to have someone hold that space, like, have you tried this way? Or what about this? Or let's look at that, because they're not attached to your personal story of it. And so that alone in itself is so critical. Like, I have had people ask me questions in certain ways or say things to me that I would never think of myself. And this is what I do for a living. But because it's mine and I'm so in it, it's really hard sometimes to get that perspective. You need to also have people that you really trust. You know, we always have different levels of expertise, and people ask me all the time, who should I go and see? I'm like, do you trust them? Then go and see them. Like, even if it's, you don't know why, but there's just this real rapport there and everyone's telling you to go to that person, but you really want to go to that person, you've got to follow that. You know, you've really got to trust who you're letting into your space, because they are coming into your life.
So it's pretty irrefutable that we're living longer than ever, but we're also living sicker than ever. Yeah. And that sort of just seems to be accelerating more and more. What do you think the role of people having smartphones and social media and Netflix and all of these things that are sort of endlessly capturing their attention has on that? And do you think it might be somewhat related to them just filling all of the space in their life?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's like what we were talking about before with filling those gaps. Why are you on social media at 9 p.m? Like, apart from Instagram, you know, using all its tools to kind of keep you on there, but why are you actually on there? And I think these are really powerful questions to ask ourselves, because we are living in a completely overstimulated world that's only going to get worse. And I mean, that effect alone biologically, with that activation of the pineal gland and keeping us in flight or fight, you know, really disrupting our neurotransmitters, even our ability to digest food. You know, if we're looking at a screen when we're eating, we are not digesting our food. It's just as simple as that. So I really feel like it's our responsibility in a world of technology to carve out time for ourselves. It has to be on everyone's self-care agenda. And this is really imperative. If the busier we are, the more we have to do it. You know, there's this beautiful quote by the Dalai Lama, and he says, everyone needs to meditate for 10 minutes every single day unless you're stressed. And then you need to do 20 minutes. Or something like that. But it's so true. Like, the more we're in that scroll hole and in that world, the more we need to remove ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, switching off the Wi-Fi and going out living in the jungle. What that does mean is 10-minute bath once a day with no screens. Or switching the screen off at, 7 p.m. and not checking emails before you go to bed. Like, we have to be really conscious about how this impacts our life. So for me, for example, when I had my second daughter, I was living in Bali and away from home, away from family, and I was having some really late nights with her, like newborn, feeding every 4 hours, just the normal stuff. And my sleep was all over the place. I had a toddler as well, running a business, working in it through all of that. And I would often put her down to sleep and then, I'll just quickly check my phone. And it's the worst thing that I could have done. And it just really threw everything out of whack for me. And so now I'm really strict about when I'm on my screen and how long I'm on that for. And there's lots of things that can support that as well. they've got apps to show you screen time and not allowing to get in and out of certain things. Like they're setting up healthy boundaries now. But for me, it changed everything, especially like just being really diligent. My team knew they couldn't contact me after these hours. And it was like setting boundaries for me time, for my time. And I really felt it physically in my body. But I think we're at that point now where we have to take some self-responsibility. It's just, we know it's not good, but what are you going to do about it? It's like eating. It's like you have to be responsible for what goes on in your body. No one else is going to do that for you unless you're a child and your mother's cooking for you. You know what I mean? Our health is our responsibility. How we show up in the world is our responsibility. Our energy system is our responsibility. Our healing is our responsibility. It's exactly the same with living in this world. We have to make conscious choices that are going to serve us.
So this program's about making a shift. And a shift could be in health, in life, from somewhere where you don't want to be to where you do want to be, or to the next version of yourself. Can you tell me what's been the biggest shift that you've ever had in your life, and how did that play out?
I think maybe not the biggest one, but the one that's certainly coming in to my mind right now is when I was 36 weeks pregnant with my first child. My husband, Pat, was diagnosed with cancer, and it just rocked my world because I was on this cusp of about to give birth, and I was also faced with his death. And it put me into this really deep and beautiful healing process where I truly, truly came to the realization that nothing is permanent in this life, and that change is always going to occur. And it's how we respond to change that is truly what matters. So for me, that whole experience, it was so challenging and so scary and so debilitating in so many ways. And yet it brought me the most profound teachings of my life. And I think the biggest one out of that is we have no idea what's going to happen. We really don't as humans. You and I sitting here right now, we're going to be completely different people this afternoon. We don't know what's going to come up at lunch or what we're going to talk about, who we're going to meet, who's going to be on the road, what we're going to eat. Like there's so many things that are shifting and changing constantly. And the biggest shift that I've made in my life, and it sounds really cliche, but it is to go with the flow. So that whatever comes up, whether it's like that person's got cancer, that's happening, this is happening, that's going on. It's like, okay, all right, let's dance with this, not deal with this. Let's dance with this. Because I feel like before I was much more of a control freak. And I also was under this belief of, we get sick when we've done something wrong, which was a huge shift for me to like break through. And also really, really, really trusting that everything that I'm experiencing is for a higher purpose, even when I cannot see it in that moment. So when Pat got sick, it was shocking. He had a massive tumor in his colon, and I was about to give birth. And then when Ruby, my daughter, came into the world, she came into this beautiful place where I was just so surrendered and open that every moment was a miracle, because I didn't know what was going to happen to her, to him, or like any of it. And so I try and keep that with me all the time. And when I find myself getting in a contracted state, getting worried, getting stressed, getting stuck in my mind, which happens all the time, I just take myself out of that moment by everything's okay. Like every little thing is actually okay. And if it's not, then it's going to shift. And it just helps me to align to that bigger purpose, bigger mission, bigger meaning of me being in the world outside my circumstances or my suffering or my pain body.
Awesome. I love it. One last question. If you could give just one piece of advice to someone that was wanting to make a shift in their health or their life, what would it be?
I would just say to them, you can do this. You know, you really can. We have everything we need in every moment to do what we need to do. And it might not be that breakthrough straight away, but just knowing that we can shift is probably the most powerful thing I could reinforce in someone else, just to remind them that you can shift. Yeah, that would be it.
There was just so much juicy information in there that I want to take a moment to recap on some of the key points. Number 1, your emotions have a huge impact on your health and your life. When we experience an emotion and don't process it correctly, it can express itself as illness or disease. You need to understand how you operate so that you can have a place where your emotions can be expressed in a healthy way. This is going to be different for each of us. Number 2, sometimes things are so close to us that we can't see the bigger picture. We don't know what we don't know, and often the things going on in the background, in our deeper layers of consciousness, are what really drives our emotions and behaviours. Number 3, sometimes we use food to fill a void inside of ourselves. So rather than address the reason why we're sad or lonely or missing something from our lives, we fill it with sugar or junk food or overeating or even alcohol and drugs. Number 4, we need to create more space in our lives. As Kate said, without space, we can't identify and then give our body what it needs. We are always on the go and doing a million things, but we can't really listen and get to know our body's wisdom without creating the space to do so. What I love about Kate's podcast, Lean In, is that with every episode, she gives you an accompanying meditation or reflection track to help you go deeper and really feel what you've learned. This is an excellent example of making space and a great example for Kate living her values here and giving you a tool to create a little space and to tune in and listen to what your body is trying to tell you. Learning is great, but doing is better. Here are a few actions that you can take as a result of listening to this episode of the Expert Series. Number 1, first of all, I want you to jump over and subscribe to Kate's podcast, Lean In. These themes and insights run right through all of her content, and I know that you'll gain even more by listening in. Number 2, consciously make some space in your life. This could be as simple as sitting down with a cup of tea and taking some deep cleansing breaths. You could do some meditation or relaxation, or go for a walk in nature. It might even be that rather than jumping on your phone when you wake up in the morning, you sit up and take 5 nice deep breaths and perhaps do a little stretching. If you don't make space for you, you'll allow your life to become overcrowded and you'll end up feeling overstretched, overwhelmed, and not in tune with your body. Number 3, consider seeing someone to help you move stuck emotions and clear trauma. This could be a counsellor or psychologist to begin with, or someone that works with a deeper subconscious mind, like a hypnotherapist, kinesiologist, or other emotional wellness practitioner. We often focus on the physical and ignore the mind, when this is actually often the most important. Number 4. Lastly, if you're looking for deep and total health transformation, I'd recommend looking into doing a 10-day fasting retreat. This is very different to intermittent fasting. Over 10 days, you're able to go so deep physically, emotionally, and spiritually that it can shift things in a very profound way. For more on this, go to naturalinstincthealing.com. I'll provide a link in the show notes. Now, I know that for a lot of you, some of this stuff may be really new. What I know about the emotional wellness side of health is that it takes a lot of courage to be able to look at our stuff and be honest about where we are really at. If something has come up for you during this episode and you need some help, please reach out to the team at Shift or your health practitioner for support. If you loved Kate Reardon, I'd recommend following her on Facebook and Instagram and checking out her website, katereardon.com.au. That's katereardon.com.au. And of course, listen to her podcast, Lean In. All of these links will be in the show notes. If you know someone that is struggling emotionally and may need some support, please share this episode with them. It only takes one thing to set off the catalyst to shift, and for them, this episode might be that very thing. In the next episode of the Expert Series, we have the urban monk, Pedram Shajai. Pedram drops some serious truth bombs about the state of our healthcare system and some vital information that we all really need to know.
Coming up on The Shift.
Tell me a little bit about how the bulk, I guess, of humans are existing at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know if they're existing.
How do people do it? How do they upgrade their operating system?
Well, first things first, you got to upgrade your health, right? You got to fix your gut.
I only learnt last week the proton pump inhibitors were over the counter in America, which is...
It's ridiculous. Well, it's great. It's just like, hey, shut up, go back to work, watch your TV, everything's fine here. I mean, it is Animal Farm over here.
How we feel colours our days. If we're emotional, anxious, low, or have low self-esteem, it severely impacts on our lives. In Season 2 of The Shift, we'll explore our minds, the neurochemistry, the biology, the emotions, and the subconscious. You don't want to miss this, so be sure to subscribe so that you know when it drops.